But the truth behind the Golden Age of Piracy was far darker than the legends ever admitted. It was an age of hunger, disease, shattered bodies, and endless bloodshed where survival itself became a daily victory. As the Royal Navy tightened its grip on the Atlantic, the pirate world slowly collapsed beneath relentless pursuit, public executions, and failing strongholds. In the end, the black flag disappeared from the horizon, leaving behind only ruined ships, forgotten graves, and a brutal history written not in buried treasure, but in fear, suffering, and death.
Enjoy the video, and don't forget to subscribe.
Trace your finger along the map from Nassau toward the Windward Passage and picture the year 1718 as the smell of rotting oak, boiling pine tar, damp hemp rigging, stale bilge water, burning sulfur, and salt carried across dark Atlantic swells beneath low storm clouds while snapping canvas echoed through every shroud and stay. The Golden Age of Piracy is often remembered as an age of hidden treasure and fearless captains. Yet the reality was a world built upon starvation, mutilation, disease, and relentless violence where every sunrise threatened another death. Between roughly 1715 and 1725, hundreds of merchant vessels crossed waters haunted by pirate sloops displacing between 90 and 120 tons. Their hulls shaped with pronounced tumblehomes supported by massive white oak futtocks fastened using hand-forged iron spikes nearly 11 inches long, before careful careening covered every seam with twisted oakum soaked beneath boiling pine tar. Even before battle began, the ship itself demanded endless labor, because expanding planks opened tiny cracks that admitted seawater into the bilge, forcing exhausted sailors to pump hour after hour merely to keep the vessel afloat. Pirate Articles of Agreement promised equal shares of plunder, compensation for lost limbs, and democratic votes for captains, yet desperation often shattered those promises long before treasure appeared. Hunger transformed loyal companions into thieves, infected wounds became death sentences within days, and every voyage slowly consumed the crew through fever, dehydration, and exhaustion even before a single Royal Navy sail appeared beyond the horizon. The first exchange of cannon fire revealed how terrifying pirate combat truly was, because every broadside unleashed bronze guns commonly cast from an alloy averaging nearly 88% copper and roughly 10% tin with only trace impurities, producing barrels capable of surviving repeated explosions generated by black powder composed of approximately 75% saltpeter, 15% charcoal, and 10% sulfur. Once the glowing match touched the priming powder inside the touch hole, flame raced through the vent before igniting the main charge in milliseconds, creating expanding gases that accelerated iron round shot with devastating force. When a solid cannonball struck an enemy hull, it rarely passed cleanly through the timber. Instead, it shattered thick oak planking into thousands of razor-sharp wooden splinters traveling at lethal speed, tearing through flesh more efficiently than the iron projectile itself. Gun crews worked barefoot across decks, slippery with seawater, grease, and blood, while breaching ropes stretched violently against heavy wooden carriages after every recoil. Smoke thickened until visibility collapsed to only a few feet, forcing officers to shout commands almost blindly. Amid that choking haze, men slipped on severed limbs, shattered tackle crashed from damaged yards, and broken deadies snapped apart beneath overwhelming strain, while terrified surgeons below deck prepared saws, linen bandages, boiling water, and iron cauteries for the flood of wounded that every broadside inevitably produced. Far from glorious freedom, daily life aboard a pirate vessel resembled relentless industrial labor carried out beneath constant fear. Before dawn, the crew inspected standing rigging, replaced worn seizings, tightened shrouds, and examined every chain plate supporting the lower masts, because one unnoticed weakness could bring an entire mast crashing onto the deck during a gale. Salt crystals ate into hemp fibers, tropical heat expanded timber, and repeated rolling loosened wedges securing the mast partners. Every pump stroke removed foul bilge, water filled with mud, insects, decaying food, and leaking animal waste, while the smell of rot mixed with smoke from the galley where salted beef, hard biscuit crawling with weevils, dried peas, and stale water formed the ordinary diet. Fresh fruit disappeared within days, allowing scurvy to slowly destroy gums, loosen teeth, and weaken muscles as vitamin deficiencies silently spread across the crew. Rats multiplied inside the hold despite relentless hunting, chewing rope, contaminating flour, and feeding upon the dead whenever disease overwhelmed the living. Even routine maintenance demanded dangerous precision as sailors climbed more than 70 feet above the sea onto narrow foot ropes beneath violently snapping topsails, balancing with tar-blackened hands while icy rain, sudden gusts, and rolling waves threatened to throw them into the Atlantic, where survival depended less upon swimming than upon whether the ship could turn back before darkness swallowed another exhausted sailor forever. Pirate brutality reached far beyond the battlefield because captured merchant crews frequently became valuable tools of intimidation rather than prisoners awaiting mercy. A wealthy captain might be held for ransom under the customs established by earlier privateers operating with letters of marque, yet ordinary sailors often faced beatings designed to reveal hidden cargo, buried coin, or secret shipping routes. Contemporary accounts describe men suspended by their wrists from yardarms, forced to stand barefoot upon heated deck, planking beneath tropical sun, or threatened with slow marooning on isolated sandbanks carrying little more than a musket, a handful of powder, and a bottle of water. Others witnessed executions intended to terrify future victims into immediate surrender before resistance even began. The Black Flag itself served as psychological warfare because experienced merchant captains understood that every minute spent fighting increased the likelihood of catastrophic casualties once pirates boarded. Grappling hooks crashed across bulwarks, boarding axes chopped through netting, pistols discharged at arm's length, and heavy cutlasses forged from high-carbon steel collided against naval hangars with showers of sparks. Below their boots, the deck became slick with blood flowing through the scuppers while shattered capstans, splintered railings, severed braces, torn hammocks, smashed casks, and collapsed companionways transformed an ordinary merchant ship into a floating ruin before the victors even began dividing the cargo. By the early 1720s, the expanding campaign against piracy transformed the Atlantic into a vast hunting ground where Royal Navy squadrons relentlessly searched every harbor, inlet, and reef once considered safe. Fast sixth-rate frigates, often displacing between 400 and 600 tons and carrying 20 to 28 long guns, possessed stronger construction, superior discipline, and trained crews capable of maintaining accurate fire despite rough seas. Naval officers gathered intelligence from merchants, colonial governors, and former pirates willing to exchange information for pardons, gradually mapping hidden anchorages from the Bahamas to the Carolinas. Pirate captains who had once relied upon speed discovered that damaged hulls, worn sails, and dwindling supplies left them unable to outrun fresh warships. During desperate pursuits, crews lightened their vessels by throwing cannon, anchors, ballast stones, and even precious cargo overboard, sacrificing fortunes merely to gain a fraction of a knot. Yet every repair postponed during earlier voyages returned to haunt them as weakened futtocks creaked beneath enormous stress. Loosened treenails allowed planking to flex, leaking seams demanded constant pumping, and frayed standing rigging threatened total dismasting. The sea that had hidden their crimes for years became an unforgiving witness, carrying drifting wreckage, abandoned boats, floating barrels, and desperate survivors directly toward the patrols determined to erase the pirate world forever. The Golden Age of Piracy ended not because pirates suddenly abandoned violence, but because the brutal system that had sustained them finally collapsed beneath overwhelming military, economic, and political pressure. Colonial governments coordinated with the Royal Navy. Merchant convoys sailed under stronger escorts, and governors who had once accepted pirate gold now demanded convictions. Famous captains who had ruled the sea through terror found themselves captured, tried, and condemned beneath the authority of admiralty courts. Many ended their lives at execution dock, where the rising tide washed beneath the hanging bodies before they were displayed inside massive wrought iron gibbets weighing well over 100 pounds, suspended along busy waterways as permanent warnings to every passing sailor. Their weathered skeletons remained exposed for months or even years as salt winds stripped flesh from bone and rust slowly consumed the iron cages. The same oceans that had carried ships loaded with stolen sugar, tobacco, indigo, silver, and gold ultimately delivered overwhelming naval power to every pirate refuge. Behind the legends of black flags and hidden treasure stood a harsher reality defined by disease, starvation, shattered oak, exploding bronze cannon, broken promises within the Articles of Agreement, and a relentless cycle of violence that made the Golden Age of Piracy far worse than most people could ever imagine.